Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Well, I came out fishing today with the intention of not doing a video. Unfortunately, as I got here I realised that I'd missed something out in all the tutorials I've done for you. Now, those of you that follow my channel are going to know that I've done 2 or 3 tutorials on how to set up a waggler, how to fish with a waggler, etc. and so on. But it occurred to me this morning, what I haven't shown you is what not to do with a waggler. And even though you think you've followed all the instructions to the letter, you probably haven't. So here's a quick run through of some of the top mistakes that I've been seeing over the years. Now the first one is the float, and it's all about getting the balance right. I'm fishing at Den's Pond today, which is probably 200 or 300 metres in size and triangular in shape. It's about 3 feet deep, so I didn't want too big a float, so this one happens to take about 1 gram of shot. Having said that, I could just as easily end up fishing with this one. This is a 5 gram float, and as you can see, the top is substantially thicker and more buoyant. And similarly, I could even wind up by inserting this top here instead of this one. Again, it's about matching to the conditions of the day. So in this case, it's a nice day. It's a little bit breezy from right to left, and I'm going to start off with the 1 gram float, which is about sort of, I don't know, 3 BB or something like that, and see how that goes. Now, because there's a bit of a wind pushing through, we're probably going to find that there's going to be a bit of a what we call undertow, where the surface layer gets pushed one way and the bottom layer goes another. And that may mean that this float may move around, and that's not really what we want. And that's why we go to somewhat larger floats. So it's just a question of matching to the conditions. The second mistake I see people make is, this is being a 1 gram or 3 BB float, I've got probably 3/4 of that weight right under the float itself. That's casting weight. Then I've got a couple of dropper shot, which are number 6s down, and because it's only 3 feet deep, I only need a couple of them. Again, don't put all of this shot down here thinking it's going to cast. You're going to end up with a loop-the-loop effect. So make sure you get the bulk of the shot underneath the float. Line, that's another one. If you use too strong a line, then it's not going to work. Bear in mind, we're generally fishing today. We're not fishing for specimen fish of 20, 30, 40 pounds. We're only fishing with a light rig, and we're fishing for carp, and they could be up to, say, 10 pounds in size. So really, I'm using this, which is 6 pound breaking strain line. You might think, well, if I'm going to catch a 10 pound fish, I might as well use 10 pound line or 20 pound line. But bear in mind, if you use 20 pounds breaking strain line, it's going to be all thick and curly and horrible, and it will impede the cast. It really wouldn't help to try and get a small float like this out when you cast. So for carp then, generally about 6 pound breaking strain. If you're fishing for things like roach and bream, well, 3 or 4 pounds, maybe even a little bit less sometimes, more than adequate. Hook size, I'm using a 14 because I'm fishing for these carp, as I say, 5 to 10 pounds range. If you're fishing for roach or bream or something like that, smaller fish, then by all means go to an 18 or a 20 or sometimes even a 22 and match it to the bait you're using. Because I've got a piece of sweet corn on, the 14 is fine. If I were to put a single maggot on there, the hook would be too big relatively to the bait. So match the bait to the hook. So that's the basics of it. Now let's talk about the stuff that gets done wrongly when you're casting out and fishing. So for casting out then, one of the first mistakes you'll see is people will cast out and then basically allow the line to flow. You can probably just see that went off to the left. Then they'll engage the bail arm, but they're not properly connected to the float. If I were to leave it there, because I think that's probably where I'm going to be fishing maybe, without sinking the line is going to create a big bow, and you can see that forming now. And what that means is that that float, instead of being there, will start to get pulled sideways. That's unnatural. That's a really big no-no, and it will move your float quite rapidly in any kind of breeze. Now at the moment the breeze has dropped a little bit, but in fact, as I say that, it's starting to get up a little. But with the line being on the surface like this, what's happening is you can see the bow forming, and I was using that stump in the water out there to indicate where I was, but already the float is generally moving to the left. Now, sometimes you do want the float to move, but for the most part, for when you're starting to do this, you definitely don't want this sort of thing to happen. So I've shown you how it shouldn't be done, let's show you how it should be done. Cast out, put your hand if necessary on the spool, or put your finger on it if you can reach, flick the bail arm across. You've got no major bow formed already. You can reel it in a little bit and add with your rod under the water, and that will help, but basically the easy way to do this, put the rod under and just do that, and the whole bow disappears. You may need to do that twice, but that's the easiest way to do it. That's going to stop the line from floating on the surface, and that means that you're not going to get so much drag, if any. Now obviously if the wind really does get up and we get a huge undertow from the wind and its cyclical effects, well, again, like I said, you may have to go to a heavier float with a more buoyant tip, and if it gets really, really bad, well, you may just have to resort to something else like ledgering, method feed, or something like that. So hopefully what I've shown you so far just goes to prove that if you get this right, you catch plenty of fish. Of course, I've been known to get it wrong as well on occasion. Nobody gets it right every time. Oops. Out of there. Right. There we go. Nice fish. There is one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, guys, and that's the amount of float you have sticking out, and also the thickness of the float. Now generally I'd recommend that you have no more than, say, a centimetre sticking out. Oftentimes probably less than that, probably even 3, 4, 5 millimetres. Sometimes, depending on conditions and also the fish, for example crucian carp, you may only have a millimetre or just a dimple breaking the surface. What you don't want to do is have what we call a lighthouse, which is where you have a huge float with a huge amount of the tip sticking out, and it's never going to work. So my suggestion is, as I say, no more than a centimetre sticking out, not too wide, not too buoyant, make it suit the conditions. As you can see today it's pretty calm, but if it was getting windy and I was getting drag, I wouldn't hesitate to go a little bit thicker. But really, it's just a question of gaining the experience by going out and fishing. If it's staying in position or moving only slowly, you've probably just about got it right. If it's tearing through the swim from left to right or right to left, then you've probably got it wrong, or the conditions are just too bad for you to use that type of technique. Okay, so we've talked now about the basic mistakes that people make in their early stages when they're setting up and casting and just trying to get the float to stay still. The last thing I want to talk to you about is how to feed. Now of course everybody can sort of throw pieces of feed out or catapult them out, or however you want to get them out. But the last thing you want to do is to put somewhere your float is now and then think, oh, I'm not catching much there. So you'll throw a load over there, and then you'll throw some over there and some over there, maybe some down there, and then you'll forget all about it. And basically all you've done is, whatever fish are in your swim is you've split them up. So the idea is to concentrate your feed in either that one area, maybe a second area, and possibly, if your venue is like this one, you can put some bait just down here for later on in the day. So a maximum of 3 places. Keep the feed going in, but you have to regulate it to the amount of bites you're getting. Just because you've had 1 or 2 bites, don't go throwing in lots and lots and lots of ground bait or loose feed. All that's going to do is probably scare them away. So the idea is feed to the bites. So if you're getting a bite, then put a very small amount of feed in on the next cast, and so on and so forth. As you're getting more and more bites, if you're feeding more and more, then remember, it's small amounts, little and often. And obviously, if you feed correctly, you're going to continue to catch all day. It's very easy to overfeed some fish, particularly things like roach and bream. Obviously carp are slightly different, they're really greedy fish, but be very careful about how you feed. Ooh, well, he took off, didn't he? There we go. There we go. And the hook pulled out, just it was in the net, which saves me unhooking him. Again, beautiful condition. So there you go then folks, that's another one done and dusted. I've shown you how to set up the Waggler, I've shown you how to fish the Waggler, and now I've shown you how not to fish the Waggler. Hopefully again you've learned something today. Don't worry if you are making mistakes. As long as you recognise the mistakes you are making now, you know how to rectify them. And hopefully that means you're going to catch a lot more fish. Anyway, till the next time then, you know the score. If you liked it, click the button. If you want to subscribe you can. And until the next time, bye for now.